this time, I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Jeffrey Wheat, CTO at Lumu Technologies. Jeff, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. First off, my name is Jeff Wheat. I'm the CTO of Lumu. I want to give you a little bit about my background so you can kind of understand some of the context of where some of the things I say are coming from. NSA got me straight out of the University of Kansas before anyone knew who they were, including me. Since that time, been in a number of different roles. I've run Anheuser-Busch's global SOC. I've built large threat intel cells for the healthcare industry. More recently, I've been a CISO running an incident response company, an incident commander. So look at some of the stuff I'm going to give you throughout this is kind of ground floor, hands-on experience. So just want to bring that into the conversation today as we talk about the top attack vectors in 2024. And here's what we're going to walk through. What does the modern cyber criminal want? Okay, we're going to talk about that a little bit. How do they get it? And how can you defend yourself? So let's move on into it. So, all right, here's the Captain Obvious part of it, at least half of it. They do it for the money. We all know that, right? So that's nothing new. What's changed, though, is the geopolitical impact. There's a lot of things going on in the world right now, a lot of countries that aren't really our friends that are trying to impact the U.S., and they do that by attacking infrastructure. Local government have always been a part of infrastructure. Schools are now a part of infrastructure because of the hearts and minds factor, right? After COVID, no one's got any kind of tolerance for our kids not to be educated. We have a whole generation that's probably going to struggle in math and whatever because of the COVID deal. So any attack on infrastructure is both physical, but it's also hearts and minds. So that's the point. So what this does is that brings not only the technical capabilities of that geopolitical side, nation state actors, but also the money behind it that accelerates it. And it's driving more players out of that into this space, and it's part of the reason why they are going after schools and government stuff. Because you may ask, I'm a school, I don't have money, and I'll get into more detail on as to why that is actually a financial incentive for them as well. So first off, let's talk about the mindset of the modern criminal and how they get in. We're going to go, phishing. Look, when I was an incident responder, 90% of attacks came in through email, right? It just, all of these things that I'm showing you on the screen sync to the cyber security thought of, the human's the weakest link. You target the human, it's the easiest way to get in. So phishing, obviously, you don't have to be that savvy to get through phishing. That's getting better. But they're using AI, what used to be people's third language is being overcome by using AI, much more crafty ways of doing phishing and things like that. So that's being more and more effective with the use of AI, bringing a lot of less technical actors into the space. So phishing is always going to be a part of it. As long as there's a human answering emails, there's always going to be, you can't train your way out of it. You still need to reduce it, but it's still going to come in through the phishing. USB drives are another one. A lot of people don't realize that on a USB drive, there's a microprocessor on there, and they can subdivide that into doing what it looks like it's supposed to be doing and doing something else. This one even got the Department of Defense. Someone checked a bunch of USBs out in the parking lot, and someone unfortunately plugged it into a government machine, and bad things happened. Right, so I got to live the downside of that, which was the low cost effort to stop that was putting shoe goo in the USB drive. So whatever works. So that goes back a ways. The other one, I'm having trouble seeing the man in the middle attack. With the man in the middle attack, that's more of a proximity thing. Now, as you go through airports and Starbucks and things like that, and you use the public Wi-Fi and things like that, that becomes prevalent. What it is it's a way to intercept the sequence that goes to getting your credentials in and out and establishing secure communications. The man in the middle actually breaks into the middle of that, catches one side, pretends it's on the other. There's other versions of that where they're doing it with your banking accounts now. One of the SMS hacks where they put up a false front on the web page, send you a note, you try and get in, they say, well, we need you to, verify this PIN that we're going to send you. Well, they take your password, contact the bank asks for the PIN, they're asking you for the PIN, go in, and then voila, they've got into your bank account. So they're pretty crafty about how they're doing it. Social engineering has been around forever. We had a saying in the Intel world that, the way to get in was find the lowest ranking person and threaten them with their job. I mean, that's still true. You'll see it in the business email compromise where saying, except hopefully no one falls for the go buy gift cards. That's kind of up there with the Nigerian prince wants to give you money, but there's still that social engineering fact and applying pressure to people, and it still works. And then weak passwords, right? As humans were lazy, and everyone's probably seen the graphs where, if you have 7 letters in your password, they can break it in seconds, or versus 17 means, it takes them 10 years or whatever. Use sequences. We're also lazy. I'm going to talk about credential stuffing a little bit later, but it works. What happens is humans reuse passwords. You shouldn't do that. Especially don't do it with your bank account and something like LinkedIn or social media, because what they do is when they get into a site like that and get those passwords, they replay them into your bank accounts and whatever. And historically, 10% will hit, right? And that's called credential stuffing. So those are some things that work there. So hold on. Oops. All right. So the two main vectors are phishing, as we discussed, but now what's become a statistical tie based on our research at Lumu and what we're seeing, are hitting our customers, is info stealers. It's like a 52 to 48%. We're seeing that kind of balance within our platforms, what's coming after the customers themselves. So as we go forward, I want to talk about both of these and what's the difference and how they work together, but what we're seeing in terms of both phishing and info stealers within the platform and within our customers. So let's talk about phishing. Okay, phishing is the front end of any cyber kill chain. It's usually that it's a part of that initial access. There's some other ways for initial access, but like I said, that's 10%. That's open ports, other things like that. But 90% usually comes in some form of email, either getting them to click on a link or delivering the precursor malware. The purpose of the precursor malware is to open the door, persistence, establish a presence, as well as to move lateral through the environment. They're moving lateral through the environment to do privilege escalation. They're looking for the super user account so they can actually get into the servers they need to draw the data, things like that. But they're also looking where those crown jewels are. They're looking for things that have monetary value. And in the ransomware world, that's leverage. Anything that provides them leverage or value that they can sell to anyone else, that's what they're looking for. Then once they get in that lateral movement, then they're putting the ransomware payload in. That's when they're encrypting you. That's extracting the data, and that's when you get the note. So that's the purpose of the phishing, is to start this initial attack. So who are the biggest targets of phishing? No surprise, finance. That's kind of dove, follow the money. That's always been a deal. They're always going after the money from that standpoint. Government, you kind of get, because it's a political environment. We see instances where cities get a hit or whatever. The cities around them, I guarantee you that the political leaders walking in saying, "Don't let that happen to me." So, it's a political environment. They're providing services. A lot of times in small cities, you're providing water, stuff, life-sustaining deals. There's reasons to do, but one of the bigger ones down here is education. And you wonder why education. Well, it started off with that geopolitical. It was the hearts and minds that sent the bad guys after the schools. Unfortunately for the schools, once they were in there, they discovered the financial value of student records. Right. So a student record is worth more than a credit card record or a healthcare record, for the simple reason that a student will not check his FICA for probably the next 10, 15 years. So that's a good long run of somebody doing identity theft, credit cards, buying cars, whatever the case, using that student's data to do that. So that's very valuable out on the dark web. So that's why now you see it's not just big schools, it's little schools, it's all schools, because student records are of so much value. It's really sad, that that's the case, but that's what we're up against now. So they're doubling down on that business model and moving forward with that. So why are these segments targeted by phishing? Education providers, I just told you, it's a perfect storm of hearts and minds as well as financial value. Government, again, it's leverage, it's hearts and minds as part of the geopolitical process, of attacking our infrastructure. Financial institutions is a no-brainer. That's where the money is. That's where a lot of money is. You'd be surprised there's a lot of money in government too. They can find it when they're when the political position's on the line. Healthcare organizations, that's a huge leverage. That's life and death stuff. The leverage point on that is huge. If a hospital can't provide general services, you see all kinds of things where a hospital's hacked and they're sending ambulances to other hospitals. I mean, that's sad, but that's why, and that's why the hospitals are paying for it. And plus, they have a big attack surface, and this goes with governments too. Within the healthcare organizations, they have a lot of devices that they can't change, including protecting directly without approval from the FDA. And that takes years, right? So I mean, I've worked in environments, where Windows XP was still on the medical devices. So it's a huge attack surface. Governments have the SCADA networks; those are usually balkanized, but they do have a lot of attack surfaces, a lot of remote things. They're spread out. There's a wide range of areas to come into, and then of course the education. You've got all the student bring your own devices. There's a lot of uncontrolled devices within the environment that you have to watch, and a lot of gaps. So let's talk about info stealers. All right, so here are some of the ways that the info stealers make money. Now, info stealers are just what they sound like. They're in there to steal info, and then it's going back out on the dark web for sale or for use to use in ransomware. It's their access to data. They're drawing as much data as they can. There's all kinds in the intelligence world. There's all kinds of intelligence. There's open source intelligence. There's ELAN. You name it. It's the same in the criminal world. So they're looking for all this data that can be used either to spread throughout the environment or find more points of attack within the environment. Credential stuffing is the one I mentioned with the bank. If I can go in and steal your passwords to your email at the school or whatever, there's a 10% probability that password might get used somewhere else, so I can make some more value out of it. That's always, I mean, we're just lazy as humans. I mean, if they know that, at least don't use the same password for your bank or for something critical within your work. Account takeovers. That was one of the main areas as an incident responder that we got the call, is when someone had the cursor moving or things are doing that they weren't in control, and that's the purpose of the account takeovers. It's also in terms of email accounts. It's out there for scraping invoices. If you think, I've dealt with ones where they scrape the invoice and then they change the bank routing number to a bank in Turkey, right? And by the time they figured it out, they had sent $4.5 million to Turkey. Good news was they caught it within 10 days. So usually within a week to 10 days, they can still capture it in the SWIFT system, which is our banking system, and they can stop it and pull it back. Now it's going to cost you 10% to get it back, but at least you can get it back. So if you ever have that happen, get on it fast. Clock's ticking. You need to get in there and get it, and then pay the people that do that, and they're going to charge you 10% to pull it back. Fraud, that's obvious. Identity theft, we talked about that. Using the identity theft to take out credit on you, purchase things of that nature, and then of course ransomware. Ransomware is always the leverage key in this. So, what is infostealer malware? Let's start on the right and work our way around. Keyloggers. This is old school. Infostealers have been around for a while. The infostealer tag is something relatively new, but it's exactly what it sounds like. It's there to steal information. Keyloggers in the past were used to get your username and password. They're sitting there sniffing and waiting for you to enter usernames and passwords, and then they come back in and use those. Obvious, but it's old school. It still works. They still do it. Form grabbers. Just like I just mentioned, the purpose of grabbing the form is to either change the bank routing or to send in a new, different form to someone to get them to fill out and send money. It's all about stealing money. They're trying to grab your forms, use them for something you didn't intend them to, forces you to have somewhat of a physical requirement. If it, above a certain financial amount, they need to be some verification points and stuff is usually how you try and thwart that. Browser hijackers. This is where someone, we see this a lot in the platform where someone's hijacked someone's site, and it's kind of a false front. It's just like what I told you with the bank, where they put banks, it doesn't happen as much because they're looking for it more, but where they're putting a front in front of their normal website and acting almost like a man in the middle, taking information from you. That's how they defeat the multi-factor on it. So let's see what else we got here. We got clipboard info stealers. This is really kind of old school. Sorry, I just totally did that. Hold on, get back here real quick. Clipboard info stealers. This is old school. It's a lot of work. Anytime you do a copy and paste with that environment, it's going to store it in the clipboard. The value there is less to the threat actors. This is more kind of in stealing the intellectual property and espionage and stuff. That's the level that goes in there. I mean, that's a thing that goes back to the 90s and early 2000s when, that was one of the entry points to actually get data out of a system, was to get it off the clipboard. You don't see it as much anymore. Credential stealers, just what they sound like. They're stealing your passwords, they're stealing your certificates, things like that. They use that to retransmit, to get into your systems to get what it is they want. FTP stealers, this one's also a little bit old school. Not very many people use FTP anymore. But again, it's about grabbing documents. You think contracts, you think things like that, that you would have put into an FTP. You're trying to get that for that badge and grab that document. It's also another espionage side. Email stealers, the purpose of that is to repurpose, resend, just like I said, you get an email from the CEO, business email compromise. We saw a fair amount of that in the incident response side, in terms of, fooling people into sending money or whatever. And that's the main purpose of it. Okay, so who's the biggest targets of info stealers? It's government, finance, and education again. And it's for all the reasons we stated before, right? This is what we're seeing in our research on the platform. These are the targets we're seeing within the platform. So it's matching. This is based on our research. So you're seeing that same alignment with what's going on in the environment and who they're going after, and for all the reasons I stated before is why. So, all right, so let's walk through a real life example of how Lumu deals with this. This is an example of an info stealer with malware, right? In this instance, we caught it. If you look down the right, you can see our operational timeline. And from this, you can see this came in, at like 1 o'clock in the morning on the weekend. And we responded to it within seconds. When I say we responded to it, we automatically blocked it through our APIs on the firewall. And it says right there is a FortiGate, right? So we blocked that on the checkpoint and the FortiGate at that point. So the threat was blocked. We've got a lot more operational context, or when Jim Edwards came in on Monday morning, he was able to see what the extent of where it went before, it got blocked. So you can go and check them out, possibly scan them, see if there's any other further spread. You will see things, although it's blocked, communicating to the threat actor. There's automated processes in those when they get in where it can still spread, and still does spread. We have a school in Texas that has a scenario where, we blocked it, but it's still continuing to spread via a worm. And, we would tell them that in that threat intel tab up there, how they're doing it. But with this, when we tell you who, we're also able, and I'll show you later in attack distribution, tell you who was first contacted and the progression of the spread and which devices were hit internal to that deal. So you can get out and clean up that spread, even though knowing it can't contact to the threat actor anymore. Doesn't mean it won't keep trying through a mechanical process. So this is the beauty of it, that, we're able to block this while you sleep at night on the weekends, so that you can come in during the week and just, clean things up, or just look at it. It's situational awareness, knowing who's coming after you and how they're coming after you, and if they keep coming after you. And I'll show you some things later that are windows within the platform that give you that information and automate that threat hunting process for you. Okay, so what's the ultimate goal of the info stealers? It's ransomware. The main thing is that's their big cash cow. That's how they're doing it. Now, one thing I wanted to show you on here that's different than the other, it kind of looks like I'm throwing up the same donuts. The difference here is, with our research, what we're finding is you look at the big increase in IT and software, and you wonder why. Well, why did that jump up? Finance and government are still there. Well, why did IT and software jump up? What's occurring right now is the bad guys, they're very technical, and they're very sophisticated about how they do things, but they're going after the supply chain. It used to be in, when you talked about ransomware or something, if Mayberry RFD got hit, right? The city right next to it had nothing to do with whether it was going to get hit. It just didn't really correlate. It was kind of this big gooey cloud of the internet, and it was just random where it ended up. That's no longer the case. That's why you see things like Dallas got hit, and then Dallas County, then Addison, then it keeps spreading out like that, because especially as they go after government and education and things like that, you guys buy off the same schedules, right? you're buying a lot of the same services because they've been pre-competed and whatever, so there's that normalcy within that. So the bad guys have figured all that out. And what they're doing is they're going to the source. They're exploiting the services you buy and use, because if they get one, they've got all, right? It's like the magic key into those multiple, areas around it. And they know that, right? Give me an example of how they automate things. When I was an incident responder, we did over 90 incident responses in over 45 days on what was called the Hafnium exploit. The Hafnium exploit was a vulnerability on Microsoft Exchange. Microsoft Exchange put it out, said, hey, we got a vulnerability. It's right here. You need to go patch it. Well, the bad guys immediately reverse engineered that and rapidly went out and found every Exchange server and tried to install a backdoor called a China chopper. And basically, I call it the example of, if you went in with a realtor and put tape on the back door and came back later, it's kind of like that's a simple explanation of what's going on. But they did that. Now, the people that patched quick enough, stopped it. But if you patched after they did that and they worked it off in an economic form, best value down, if you patched it after they did that, that China chopper worked. They could still come in, they get full access to your system through it and stuff. And so we were spending a lot of time in 45 days, putting those fires out, because it was a really significant event. But that gives you an example. Whenever you see these releases that come out on vulnerabilities from the vendors, they're doing the right thing. But the bad guys are moving so fast and blocking them. So patching is important in your environment. Get to it quick, especially when they tell you, the house is going to burn down. So you need to get to that quickly for that reason, because, and now you got nation state actors working behind them and supporting them. So, it's not getting better. Throw in AI and you got a really, great mix of, them exploiting this. So that's the reason why the IT software is becoming more prominent. They're going after the IT software companies to go to that supply chain to get into the front end, with all these other things you do if there's exploits within the systems you're buying, right? And since you're buying, so I guess, another one of the cautionary tales, if someone around you gets hacked, start paying attention. Because, it's no longer, it doesn't matter to me, it's next door, that wasn't me. It's like, you guys may be using the same software and stuff that they may have used to exploit you, is the cautionary tale there. So why are these attacks successful? I told you, as an incident responder, everyone had a firewall and most of them had EDRs. And there's a couple reasons. One is, the nature of warfare, I guess I'll call it. This cyber is like regular warfare. It's like, there's attack, there's counterattack, attack, defend, counterattack. They're constantly moving, right? You lock the door, they come in the window. You lock the window, they come in through the attic. It doesn't mean you don't quit locking the front door. You just have to keep closing the exploit that they came in through. And in this case, we're showing you here, on the email, it's usually, there's all kinds of, these are vulnerabilities and exploits that, that they've taken advantage of, where they're getting authorization in the email, kind of same with the firewall. Now the EDR, it's usually about bypassing the behavior analysis that the EDR has, right? And I'm going to show you another slide here in a second that takes that to more detail. But the key point is, they're getting around you. All right, they're constantly doing it, constantly moving. You have to constantly move to keep doing it as well. And there's things there's things you don't know, and there's things you don't know. And sometimes when they're moving around these deals, it's those things you don't know that you don't know. And that's one of the things that Lumu is going to help you with, is identifying the unknowns. So what we have here is this was a case study that was done at DEF CON, which is like a hackers forum. And Dark Trace, if you don't know, it's like, they have all kinds of games like Spot the Feb, which I'm usually victim of. But at this deal, some of the main hackers, white hats we call them, they're the good guy hackers, pointed out the different ways in which things can get past the EDR. And these are the different monitoring techniques they use, and each one of those techniques was developed to close a hole in how the threat actor got around the last time, right? So the main point of this is that they're constantly going to get around what they have. And it doesn't mean you don't do EDR. Just like I said with the window or door, you still want to do it, but you can't totally rely on it. They are going to get around you because that's what they do. They're going to constantly get around. One thing to understand with EDRs use behavior analysis to they're looking at the behaviors to identify whether, that's bad or whatever, to block it or whatever. Well, they have to codify that. That takes time, right? The bad guys are using AI to rapidly go around those behaviors, and so they're becoming more effective at getting past the EDR. And think about that. Think about Symantec back in the day. It used to be you had signatures and whatever, and that blocks signatures. Well, pretty soon the bad guys figured they flip a couple bits in the exploit and it changes the hash and it defeats the signature deal. It's kind of the same here with the behavior deal. They're getting around it. Now, the one ground truth with all this is the network is the ground truth. Attacks have to come from somewhere and they have to come over the network. Lumu is finding the somewhere and giving you the visibility on the network. And in this case, you can see the NIC card. The NIC is a network interface. That's our choke point. That's where we're watching within the endpoints as well. We're watching the network as well, but it's all about the ground truth of the network. They have to go through whatever they do, regardless of what behavior they come up with, they have to come from somewhere and they have to come in through that network card. That's why we're the choke point. It's one of the reasons we're going to find the things that would get by the EDR. So, and that's really what this depicts. We're that centerpiece that is going to tie together all your defenses. We integrate with your firewalls, your endpoints. We have APIs with the email. We're looking for the threat actor locations within those emails. We're not blocking your email. What we do is when someone clicks on that link to go to that bad location, we're going to block at the firewall and then notify you which email it was and stuff. But that's that center point that's bringing that all together. I mean, I use an analogy. You've got locks on doors and windows, but sometimes you get a system that tells you if someone defeats that, right? There's an alarm goes off and someone, kicks in the door or opens the window. That's Lumu. But we're going to go even farther for you. And I'm going to tell you how we do it. So what we're doing is we're collecting your DNS, your net flows, your syslogs. And what we do with that is we take that through a list of known IOCs, indicators of compromise. We have over 100 of them. The list itself isn't the thing that's dynamic and makes us get out ahead, but it helps. It's a good first start. These are where known bad things happen. There's no false positives in this, right? Known bad things have come from these locations. We automatically block them. After we're done with that, then we take the existing data that didn't trigger that and we put it through our AI engines. We're looking for anomalies of interest. We're looking for anything odd. Do you normally go there? Port, frequency, things like that. When we get that list, we don't alert you on it. We take those we call them anomalies of interest. We take those anomalies of interest and we take them through a deep correlation engine. We can talk about all the different types that we use, but what we're doing is essentially we're looking for where those bad guys just move to, right? Because they move around, right? But we know their techniques, we know what they do, we can match that up. And when we see that, that's a new IOC, it's a new indicator of compromise, no one knew about it. When we see that, we automatically go back and block that. But because that was new and no one knew it was being used, what we do is we go back into up to 2 years of your data, we call it playback, go back into up to 2 years of your data, and we look for first and all contact with that threat actor. That's an immediate, at machine speed, your remediation list of everything that was in contact with this bad actor. As incident responders, we got paid $400 an hour to go find that information. We're giving that to you at machine speed. Now, the beauty of it is the crowd thing. With all of our customers, if another customer, another school, another city, whatever, gets hit by a new location, bad guy moves to it, that immediately at machine speed goes into that known IOC list. So that known IOC list is dynamically updating. It's not like the other ones that are updated over time with it's as fast as they move, we're quickly blocking that. And that's why we're out ahead of the threats. That's why we're catching the things that are getting past the firewalls and the endpoints and your email. And the way we work with those, we work with that system's API. So there's never any risk of us messing anything up in the access control list or whatever. We're like a local threat intelligence source to them. So what they do is they do what they do to block that on the firewall. So we're never going to mess that up. That we always work hand in glove with them. It's just like when we're working with their EDRs, it's not going to point at us as a threat because we're working with it. Right, it knows that, so that's always been good. So, all right, so I promised I would show you some things in the platform itself on how we do things. This is an example. This is that same paper supplies. This is an info stealer. Whenever it comes in, we're going to show you if you see there, we're showing you the devices it touched. If you open it up, you can see who who was logged in. If we have an agent on there, you can see who's logged in, what process was being used. That's important. That helps you, optimize your threat hunting. Look, I used a different vendor for the endpoint deal, and what it would do is whenever it saw a living off the land attack and a PowerShell is delivering off the land, it's a legitimate process being used for something that wasn't meant to be. Whenever it would see that, it didn't want to overreact, so it would put like a priority 3, priority 4 on that alert. And the problem is you might get a ton of those. You might get 30 of those, right? And you can't investigate them all, right? So what we're doing here is we're saying this is the one you need to investigate. We blocked it. It's good, but you need to go and look. If you're going to dive deeper to see if there was any data extraction or anything like that, this is the one you need to look at. So the next thing we have is we have the attack distribution. This is going to show you the nature of the progression through your network, how they spread. You can see on this one, this desktop 7SG is patient 0. It's the first one that got hit. You can see it progressed, or it persisted with it, and then it started to spread through the environment. Then that's your immediate eye source of what's going on in your network. I know I got to go and I need to sandbox desktop 7FG. If the spread doesn't stop, then I'm going to go to the end and I'm going to read our threat intel on how it's spreading and then break that cycle of spreading. If it's leapfrogging from one to the other, then that's where I go and do it. We also allow you to label by IP address and CIDR block for both functionality as well as business relevance. And in this case, we're showing you the functionality on the left and business relevance on the right. It's giving you an indicator of which part of your environment is this going after. Is it going after my crown jewels? We usually tell you to put servers as high, staff as medium, and students or guests as low, right? And then if something is unlabeled, that's intent as well. That why is there something in my network that I don't know what it is? Don't have it labeled. Did someone put an access point on my network? All that insight that we're giving you based on the network data, where all the ground truth is. And then finally, we give you a compromise radar. This is another pattern recognition kind of device or aid. If you look at it, it's a 24-hour clock. If these things are happening at 1 in the morning, pay attention. If you shouldn't have anyone doing that at 1 in the morning, that's that. You can see this is linear, right? That's a very symmetric shape. And what that tells me is that's a mechanical process. Machines act in a mechanical, symmetric way. So when I see this, I know I'm still in the mechanical deal. If that shape gets an oddness to it, an asymmetric, it starts to kind of spread out and whatever on that, that's your clue that you have a human in your network. And always pay attention when you have a human in your network. If a human has gone to the time to get in your network, they've identified the value and they're going to persist. They're going to continue to check the windows and doors and try to find a way in. It's your indicator that, hey, this is more serious. Lumu's got it blocked, but we're going to keep watching it. So with that, I think we used about 135. We got a lot of time for questions. We have a scan here. You can use. You can go get Lumu for free. What it'll do is it'll tell you what's getting through your network. This free version is going to tell you what's getting through. It won't give you a lot of the context I showed you. It won't do the automation, but at least you can go and see how your current systems are performing. So I'm going to leave this up here while we do the questions so that you can download that and take us out and drive us like you stole it. So with that, I'll take some questions.
Thank you so much, Jeff. There are a few questions in the Q&A box. Just a reminder to all of our attendees that if you do have any questions for Jeff, to put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. The first question that we have is, is AI going to be used to combat other threat actors that are coming in? Sorry, is the AI with the greater processing power going to overcome other AI tools?
If you're asking well, one, bad guys are the earlier adopters. We kind of sit around and think about how we can use AI. They just take it out and drive, right? So, and that's what you're seeing there. It started with email. They used AI to make more sophisticated email attacks and stuff. Now they're using it for getting around the behavior analysis of like what's in an EDR. They're using that to find the vulnerabilities in the systems, right? So they're finding the vulnerabilities at AI speed. We have to use AI, and we do at Lumu. That's how we're identifying when they're moving to the new locations. We have to use AI to match. You got to match force with force, right? You don't fight howitzers with rifles, right? You don't hunt ducks with howitzers either. But so it becomes that deal. You just have to. It's an arms race. As the bad guys use AI, and you've got nation state actors, so they've got access to really good AI, right? So, as vendors, as a community, and of security professionals and stuff, we have to use AI to stay ahead. It's quick and the dead. You can't, and AI and automation, those are the two keys. You have to use the AI to identify it, and you have to use the automation to rapidly block, right? Because they're attacking at a machine speed rate. We have to defend at a machine speed rate. That's been one of the big advantages of Lumu for schools and governments. I mean, you guys, a small school is my school was 2,000 people. That's a small school. That's a good sized company, but you don't have the budgets or the staff that, especially out in Western Kansas or whatever, you probably don't have, the trained staff to defend yourself out there. So we're going to have to automate. We're going to have to do that. And that's where Luma's done really well with the schools. And we're trying to make it a fair fight. I mean, that's why I didn't go to NSA for the pay raise. I can't stand that this is going on. So everything, I do, whatever is about trying to defend, people like you that need it.
Our next question is, how long does it take Lumu to learn and respond to threats?
Yeah. So, and that's a common deal within any behavior model. It's got to, with any data model, the more data you have, the more accurate the model is. So a lot of systems out there have to take a lot of data from you before they can recognize the patterns that they're going to block. That isn't the case with Lumu. One, we're location based. These are locations, so that's an immediate response. We do use AI, and we're learning what you do within your network, but part of that AI is also learning what the bad guy does. And because of that whole deal, we've already learned it. So there isn't a learning cycle like you have in some systems where it's waiting a month before it starts to alert. Well, we're alerting right out of the box. And that's one of the advantages we have is, it's an immediate response. In fact, we've got incident response groups working with us to use us to go in for those reasons, because we get those actions. We're helping them keep the bad guy, because once they get the bad guy out, he keeps trying to come back in. He's got time invested and whatever in that environment. He's going to continue to try and come back in. Plus, they've left a bunch of stuff in there to get back in, or that they're going to downsell. So that rapid response, rapid identification that Lumu does is one of the advantages that we have over other technologies.
Our next question is, does using Lumu require a client installation on all endpoints in the network, or is it only going to reside on critical infrastructure like domain controllers and file servers?
The answer is it's hybrid. We don't require an endpoint, we don't require an agent on everything. At your enterprise level, we're going to collect things via a virtual machine, and that's an advantage in and of itself, because what it's going to do is it's not only going to see all that communications with anything that might have an endpoint on it, but it's also going to see things that you can't put endpoints on. That's why in healthcare we're a big help, because those medical devices you can't put an endpoint on, we're going to see that communication to it. If you're a small city with SCADA, if something gets out of your vulcanized SCADA network, we'll see it. We'll see cameras, printers, anything in communicating with the threat actor, we're going to see, because we collect it with that virtual machine. Now, if you have cloud architectures, we have APIs to the cloud architecture, bring that in for your remote workforce. So like with schools, when the teachers take their laptops home, we have agents that work on the laptops. They're going to work with the EDR on that laptop, or, we integrate with Defender and other things like that, that we're going to protect them while they're off. Right. But if they get hit with that agent on there, it's also identified back to the firewall. So when they come back inside the school or the city or whatever, that firewall is preloaded to block whatever they were in communication with. So the the answer is we do it all. Now, a lot of times people will put our agents on their servers and some critical infrastructure inside, because we do get a little bit more information when that agent's on there. like who's logged in, what process was being used and stuff. So for the key elements like servers and stuff, they can put the agents, but we don't require it. Well, we're going to see that. That's one of the gaps we cover. Like, I come from DoD, we have interlocking fields of fire because really bad things happen when people get through those gaps and get behind it. It's the same in cyber. If you don't know they're getting through. So that's one of the gaps we close. And we do it by the way we collect that.
Our next question is, does Lumu create a lot of alerts?
No, and that's part of the thing in this environment is there's a lot of alert fatigue. Because we're location based, you remember that incident I showed multiple contacts behind it that had different deals. In behavior analysis, they're going to give you an alert for each behavior trigger, right? So like in that example I showed you, there were, I don't know, I think there might even have been 100 contacts. For that one alert we gave you, there's going to be a multitude of what would have been behavior alerts behind it. And we take that and condense that into that one alert. It's going to this one location. We're blocking this one location. Here's what connected. So what that does is, I don't usually expect to see more than 4 or 5 or 6 alerts a day when you first come on. And then that's going to continually get less because as we take away the areas in which they can operate from, DoD parlance, we're taking away the area in which the enemy can operate so we can find, fix, and finish them. So we're taking away where they can come from so you get less and less alerts. And any one of those location alerts could have 10, 20, 30 behavior alerts that would have happened behind it. So that's how we're making you operationally efficient as well.
What makes Lumu different than the firewall and EDR?
What makes us different is that illumination process. This right here is what makes it different. That the first level of that, a lot of what firewalls and whatever are using. That's why I said we have the same lists, and we may have more, but it's that process to the right. It's that dynamic crowd thing. We're identifying at machine speed that where the bad guys are moving from and stopping them. But that's happening with every one of our customers, which is constantly making that known IOC list dynamic. That combined with the fact that we're automating the response within your existing infrastructure, right? So not only are we finding it fast, we're blocking it fast. We're self-healing your environment. So I showed you the triangle with us in the middle. We identify that they got by. This is the unknown, unknown. What I don't know, I don't know. We just told you. We fixed it on the system. It got passed, and we made it better. We blocked it on the system. It got passed, and then we made it so that system won't miss that again. So it's that constant feedback loop of compromise assessment and fixing that we're doing that makes your whole environment better. It's stitching it together. Think of us as the glue in the middle, as of that layered defense. That it's not just the crunchy outside, right? We're on the inside watching the network, ground truth, and then taking that information when it gets through and updating your systems around it and doing it at machine speed.
Our next question is, does Lumu require any hardware installation?
No, what we're doing is we're collecting your DNS logs and your sys logs. We do that with a virtual machine. There's no bump on the wire. If you think of it, we're taking the envelope off the letter. Well, there's no data privacy issues because we're not capturing packet capture. We're not capturing the packet itself. We're looking at the metadata header, right? And that's what we're storing. So we store that, we collect that through your logs, right? It's same with your email. We're not keeping your email. We're scanning your email for those bad locations. We keep a table. We don't alert. We're not telling you every time you're getting a bad email. What happens is when someone clicks on one of those links and tries to go to those bad locations, we're going to block that at the firewall, but then we're going to notify you down in the lower part of the event. You'll get an event like the one I showed you. At the bottom, we'll say this email initiated, the clicking of this email initiated this threat, right? And here's who it went to, and here's the email, and here's the attachments with it. So that's why we put our email part under the intelligence, because it's giving you more intelligence to make your environment better. We're automatically blocking it, but we're telling you, look, Lauren needs to quit clicking on links or whatever, or we need to go talk to Lauren about clicking links and show her what it did. So sorry, I'm picking on you, Lauren.
That's okay. Our next question is, how does Lumu block on the firewall?
So what we do is with all our integrations, we're using the API. So we're using what that firewall gave us connectivity to do them. And it's really sexy. It doesn't, what's nice about it, most firewalls treat us as like a threat intelligence source. So we're not physically going into your access control and making changes. You can easily turn a deny all into an allow all. What we're doing is we're connecting to their API, and telling them this is a bad location that's trying to contact here, and then they go in and make that change, the way they know how. So what happens is, whenever they do upgrades, or there's no break fix, it always works because we're working with that API directly. We're working hand in glove with those systems. So that's how we do it.
Where does Lumu store the data?
We store all our data. We collect it at that virtual machine, whatever, compress it, groom it. If you're a data scientist, groom it, and then we push it to AWS Virginia. Stays here in the US. It's always, and it's encrypted. The path is encrypted. It's all protected. And when I say data, it's that metadata. It's not actual anything there's no PII, no privacy issues, no anything like that. But that data itself is stored in AWS Virginia.
And that is all the time that we have for questions today. Thank you so much, Jeff, for your participation.
Thanks everyone for coming. Hopefully this was useful. If we missed any questions, please reach out. We're more happy to keep answering them.
I want to thank all of our participants for joining us today. We hope that you found this webcast informative and helpful to you and your organization.